It was the spring of 1864, and campaign season was about to begin. Ulysses S. Grant was brought east and made a lieutenant general, the first person to hold that full rank since George Washington, and it took a special act of Congress to make that happen. Grant was never commander of the Army of the Potomac, but he was general-in-chief, thus making him in charge of all of the Union armies, and unlike his predecessors, he placed his headquarters with the Army of the Potomac and basically, well, decided the actions that General Meade, who was the Army of the Potomac's commander, would take against General Lee. Grant also had a strategy to help bring about victory in the East quicker. And that was, he sent a force down the Shenandoah Valley to take on the Confederates there, clear the valley of all the Confederates, and then turn east to threaten Lee's left flank. So today I'm here at Harpers Ferry, one of my favorite places to come to just relax. This is a beautiful National Historic Park, and what I'm going to talk about today really has nothing to do with Harpers Ferry, but it does have everything to do with the Shenandoah Valley, which Harpers Ferry is basically the northern end of the Shenandoah Valley. The Shenandoah Valley basically ends where you can see behind me the Shenandoah River flowing in to the Potomac River. So I'm going to take a little bit around Harpers Ferry. I'm going to do probably many episodes on Harpers Ferry, but let me just give you a little taste of this beautiful historic park as I prepare you for today's episode. Hello and welcome back to my channel, Civil War Reports. I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. And as I mentioned, I am in Harpers Ferry today as an introduction to today's episode. Two things before I get started. One is, please help the channel out. Give me a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button. It'll really help because I want to travel to different places other than just the Gettysburg area to bring you reports from the Civil War, and every subscription will help me in that endeavor. Also, I'm going to be talking about my second favorite battle of the American Civil War that I love to read about, and that is, believe it or not, the Battle of New Market, which took place on May 15th, 1864. And one historian described it as the most important secondary battle of the American Civil War. So why am I in Harpers Ferry? Well, that battle, New Market, took place in the Shenandoah Valley. And I am here basically at the very northern end of the Shenandoah Valley, Harpers Ferry. The Shenandoah Valley stretches for about 175 miles south of where I am. It really ends around Lexington, Virginia. And the interesting thing about the valley, I'll let you know a little bit of my personal family history. When I was a little kid, my family used to do a lot of vacationing in the South. I guess that's where I really started to fall in love with the South. We had two sets of relatives that lived in Florida, one relative in St. Petersburg, the other one down in Fort Lauderdale. So we did a lot of vacationing in Florida. Also, my parents knew from when I was a little kid, and I may actually do an episode on what got me interested in history. I may do a personal episode on that some point down the road. My first love was the American Revolution, and if I do the episode that I want to do, you'll see why. So we did a lot of vacationing in Virginia. We went to Colonial Williamsburg twice, the Yorktown battlefield twice, Jefferson's home, visited a lot of historical sites in Virginia. And that's where I really fell in love with the South and how beautiful it is and how friendly the people were down there. But I digress. So the interesting thing about the Shenandoah Valley, now when we went on vacation, we would say we're going down south, and when vacation was nearing an end, we'd say we're going to start heading north. Shenandoah Valley is opposite. If you're new to the Civil War history or any history that involves the Shenandoah Valley, going south is considered going up the valley because you actually go higher in elevation as you go south. And if you head north, you're not going up the valley north, you're going down the valley because lower elevation. As you can see, we're right along the Potomac River here. Before I get into the main topic of this episode, I just want to talk a little bit about the Shenandoah Valley. This was an area very, very vital to the Confederacy. You got the Blue Ridge Mountains on the east, Allegheny Mountains on the west. As I mentioned, it's about 175 miles long. It's not very wide, but the land is extremely fertile. And this was the breadbasket of the Confederacy. It was very important for the Confederacy to hold the Shenandoah, not only for just that reason, but there are very few gaps in the Blue Ridge Mountains that would allow an army to pass through. So who controlled the Shenandoah? If it was the Yankees, they could easily cut through one of those passes and take Lee's army in flank. And that's what General Grant was hoping for. Because the Shenandoah Valley was so important to the Confederacy, they went to great lengths to protect it. And in 1862, and I will be doing many episodes on this, protection of the Shenandoah Valley was assigned to General Stonewall Jackson. He received the nickname Stonewall at First Bull Run, and due to his amazing victories that I'm told are still studied at military colleges around the world, his victories here in the Shenandoah in 1862 also earned him the name the Lord of the Valley. It was very important for the Confederacy to maintain control of the Shenandoah. So let's take a look at General Grant, President Lincoln's strategy for the Shenandoah Valley in 1864. In June of 1863, as General Lee's army is heading towards Pennsylvania, the leading corps of that army was General Ewell's 2nd Corps Army of Northern Virginia. And it was his responsibility to clear the Shenandoah Valley, the lower Shenandoah Valley, of any Union troops that were there, and he successfully did that, taking about 6,000 prisoners under the command of General Milroy. And then after Lee's army came back following the battle at Gettysburg, President Lincoln put a military presence back in the area in the form of a new department under the command of Brigadier General Benjamin Kelly. Well, in the early months of 1864, Ulysses S. Grant is brought east. He is made General-in-Chief, which means he's in command of all of the Union armies and in command of all of Union operations, except, of course, the President, who's Commander-in-Chief. And it was decided very early on to replace Kelly with another commander. Union enlistments have been slacking off despite the victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg in 1863. And so it was decided to put somebody else in charge who may also help with Union recruitment. And it was decided to put General Franz Siegel in charge of this department that was here in generally this part of the country. It was in West Virginia and Maryland. And I got to state right now that Lincoln and Grant really had little respect for Franz Siegel as a military commander, but he was a foreigner. He was born and raised in one of the German states. Germany would not become a unified country until 1871. He received his military training not at West Point, but over in Europe in one of the German states. And they thought he would be a good choice to help with Union recruitment and to clear out the Shenandoah Valley. We're going to see that that did not work out as planned. On February 29th, 1864, leap day of all days, Franz Siegel received his orders to take command of the department, relieve General Kelly, and he would await orders from General Grant as to what would happen in the spring of '64. Now, if Lincoln and Grant didn't have much faith and trust in Sigel. Some of his troops also did not have much faith and trust in Sigel. He did not have the most illustrious military career during the American Civil War. And to make matters worse, Sigel didn't really have much respect for some of his troops. He referred to both the 116th and 123rd Ohio Infantry Regiments as useless, because they were captured the summer before, as I mentioned, by General Ewell as the Army of Northern Virginia was heading towards Pennsylvania. And he also referred to his cavalry, which was about 1,500 horses strong, as being in wretched condition. So we really don't have the makings for a really good campaign here when the person in charge of the department is not really respected by his superiors and the folks below him. Some of them don't have respect for him and he don't have respect for them. It's a bad combination going into the spring of 1864. Okay, I'm going to end the little tour of Harpers Ferry before we move on in front of one of my favorite places to be, whether it's Harpers Ferry or someplace else, in front of the bookshop. Okay, so let's take a look at what happened here. As I mentioned, on February 29th, Leap Day, Sigel is handed command of the department. On March 29th, exactly 1 month later, he receives orders from General Grant calling on a two-pronged attack against Staunton, Virginia. Why Staunton? Well, or is it Staunton? I know they pronounce it differently down there. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. That was a major city for the Confederate Army. It was a site of a railroad junction. There was military hospitals there and warehouses filled with food and munitions for the Confederate Army, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. So it was vital that Staunton be protected. And Sigel had a force of roughly about 25,000 men in this department. Some would be left behind, of course, but Grant wanted a two-pronged attack. One column would be under the command of Brigadier General George Crook. He was to lead his army south through West Virginia, causing any damage that could aid the Confederate war effort, and then head northeast towards Staunton. They will be dealt with. We'll talk about that in a separate episode. As for Sigel, he was going to lead an army of approximately 8,000 men, infantry. About 8,000 infantry were going to head up the Shenandoah Valley under the command of Sigel. With him, he would have 3 batteries of artillery and, as I've already mentioned, 1,500 cavalry that Sigel really didn't have much use for. Sigel assembled his army, his small little army that he was going to head up the Shenandoah Valley in Beverly, West Virginia. And it was from there that the New Market campaign would kick off and he would begin to lead his army up the Shenandoah Valley. Hello folks, I am now in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and I am in front of a really beautiful historic home owned by Dr. Adam Stevens, and he's a rather unique individual. He served in both the British Army and he served in the Continental Army under George Washington. He also was a big proponent of both the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution as per the folks inside that house. I was kind of hoping to find a historical site in Martinsburg, and I lucked out and found this, took a tour of the house. It's gorgeous. If you're ever in Martinsburg, and it doesn't matter if you're a big Civil War buff like myself, come and see this piece of history, because it is a piece of American history right here. All right, so why am I here in Martinsburg? Well, after Sigel established his army at Beverly, West Virginia, he put them on the march, and they came to Martinsburg, West Virginia. That was their first stop on the New Market campaign. On April 27th, He staged a grand review. I guess he was trying to imitate McClellan with the grand reviews that McClellan used to do. It didn't really do much to inspire his troops or endear them to Sigel, because again, some of them just didn't have much love for Franz Siegel, and it didn't really do much to change his opinion about them. Again, bad mix for a military campaign when you got a general in charge of a small army. The troops there don't particularly like him. He don't particularly like them. And his superiors, Grant and Lincoln, don't particularly care much for Sigel. It's bad mix. But they hold a grand review. And then 2 days later, April 29th, they begin their march up the Shenandoah Valley and to their ultimate fate at the Battle of New Market. Spoiler alert, battle takes place on May 15th, 1864. It is a Confederate victory. It is the last major Confederate victory in the Shenandoah Valley. I don't know if you believe in superstition, but this one I believe in. Exactly 1 year earlier, on May 15th, 1863, Stonewall Jackson's body was laid to rest in his hometown of Lexington. And some people believe, and I'm one of them, you could disagree with me and that's fine, that Stonewall Jackson was looking out over the Confederate Army, looking out over General Breckinridge and his small band of Confederates that would take on Sigel at New Market. And I believe that Stonewall was looking over. So this is the end of the first of what's going to be a series on the New Market campaign. Again, this is my second favorite battle of the Civil War to read about. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, one historian described New Market as the most important secondary battle of the war. And I agree with that. So next up, we're going to look at how the Confederates met the threat from Sigel. The Confederates were commanded at New Market by General John Breckinridge. Spoiler alert, another one. He is the only former U.S. vice president to be a Confederate general. And he served the Confederate Army. He would also be Secretary of War for a while for the Confederacy. So please look forward, come back, check out my future episodes dealing with the Battle of New Market, and we will get to the battle itself. But next up will be a look at the Confederate side, as today we looked at the Union side. And I'm looking forward to that, because anytime I get to take a trip up the Shenandoah Valley, I like to take it. So until next time, for Civil War Reports, I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. Thank you for watching. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends, let them know about this channel, and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.